July 22, 1456. The Danube River fortress of Belgrade. In the pre-dawn darkness, a Hungarian soldier named Pál Kinizsi jerked awake to a sound that would save his life. Not the thunder of Ottoman cannons, not the battle cries of janissaries, but the low, rumbling growl of a mastiff named Sarkany, dragon, whose hackles had risen in the blackness. Within seconds, 40 other war dogs along the fortress walls began their chorus. The supposedly sleeping Ottoman sappers, tunneling beneath Belgrade's walls with enough gunpowder to obliterate an entire section of defense, found themselves suddenly exposed. The canine early warning system had detected what human sentries could not: the subtle vibrations of digging, the foreign scents carried on the night wind, the presence of death approaching from below. By sunrise, Sultan Mehmed II, conqueror of Constantinople just 3 years earlier, would suffer his first major defeat, not at the hands of superior tactics or larger armies, but because of something far more primal. But the truth was far more terrifying than anyone realized. Before we uncover the truth about the Siege of Belgrade dogs, how Hungarian defenders used mastiffs to detect night attacks and saved Christianity from Mehmed the Conqueror, make sure to subscribe to Fear Sermon and ring that notification bell. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers. This story will take us into the darkness of medieval warfare, where the line between salvation and slaughter was patrolled by creatures who saw what humans could not. The summer of 1456 arrives heavy with dread across Christian Europe. 3 years have passed since Constantinople fell. The city that stood for over 1,000 years as Christianity's eastern bastion now bears the name Istanbul. Sultan Mehmed II, just 21 years old when he shattered the Byzantine Empire, has earned his title, Mehmed the Conqueror. His Ottoman forces possess something Europe desperately lacks: the most advanced siege artillery in the known world. Cannons capable of hurling half-ton stones, bombards that can reduce medieval walls to rubble. Belgrade sits at the confluence of the Danube and Sava rivers, a fortress city in the Kingdom of Hungary. To military strategists of the era, Belgrade represents more than stone and mortar. It is the gateway. Should Belgrade fall, the path to Vienna lies open. The Hungarian heartland becomes vulnerable. Western Europe trembles at the possibility. The city's commander, John Hunyadi, understands the mathematics of doom. He commands perhaps 7,000 men, a mixture of professional soldiers, peasant crusaders rallied by the Franciscan friar John of Capistrano, and local defenders who know they're protecting their homes. Intelligence reports suggest Mehmed approaches with a force exceeding 60,000 warriors, including the elite Janissary Corps, Christian boys taken as children, converted to Islam, and forged into the most disciplined infantry on earth. But Hunyadi possesses something the Ottomans do not anticipate. For 3 generations, Hungarian nobles have bred a specific type of war dog. These mastiffs descend from ancient Molossian hounds, the same breed that fought beside Alexander the Great. Standing 30 inches at the shoulder, weighing up to 200 pounds, these animals are bred not for aggression alone but for something more subtle: awareness. Hungarian military doctrine has evolved to include canine sentries, particularly for detecting the mining operations that have become the Ottoman Empire's specialty. The dogs are trained from puppyhood to recognize the scent signature of foreign soldiers, to feel the ground vibrations of digging, to sense the displacement of air that comes with human movement in confined spaces. Each animal is paired with a specific handler. They sleep beside their masters, they eat from the same bowls. The bond between man and beast represents a military innovation that Istanbul's war colleges do not teach. As June bleeds into July, Belgrade's residents watch the horizon darken with Ottoman banners. Mehmed's army arrives like a locust swarm. The Sultan himself takes residence in a golden tent visible from the fortress walls, a calculated intimidation. His message is clear: the man who conquered Constantinople has come personally to take Belgrade. What Mehmed does not know is that 53 war dogs now patrol the fortress perimeter. Their handlers have names like Istvan, Ferenc, Janos, common men who sleep with their hands on their animals' flanks, feeling each breath, reading each tension in the mastiff's body like scripture. The siege begins July 4th with a bombardment that shakes the earth. July 5th, 1456, first contact 3 hours after sunset, a mastiff named Orozlen, Lion, stationed on the western wall, begins a behavior his handler Ferenc Szabo has never witnessed. The dog's entire body goes rigid, his ears flatten, but he does not bark. Instead, he produces a sound from deep in his chest, barely audible, a vibration more than a growl. Ferenc places his hand on the ground. He feels nothing. The Ottoman bombardment has ceased for the night. and the usual sounds of siege camps drift across no man's land, cooking fires, voices, the movement of thousands of men. Everything seems normal. Oroslan's lips curl back from his teeth. Still he does not bark. Ferenc trusts 3 years of partnership more than his own senses. He reports to his commander, who dispatches sappers to inspect the western wall's foundation. They discover nothing. Ferenc receives a warning about wasting military resources on a nervous dog. But at dawn, when Ottoman troops withdraw from their forward positions, alert defenders spot fresh earth carefully concealed near the wall's base. Someone attempted to dig during the night. Oroslan detected them at a distance that should have been impossible, nearly 80 feet through solid stone. The dog receives an extra portion of meat. Ferenc receives an apology. Military scribes record the incident in the garrison log. This detail will prove significant. July 8, 1456. The pattern emerges 4 nights into the siege. The canine sentries begin exhibiting synchronized behavior. This happens at precisely 2:14 a.m., a time verified by multiple sources, as it occurs during the changing of the watch. 7 dogs stationed along the southern rampart simultaneously assume alert positions. They do not bark or howl. Instead, they stare at the ground, their attention focused on something beneath the fortress itself. Their handlers report the behavior identically: rigid posture, flattened ears, that subvocal growl. This time, Commander Hunyadi personally inspects the walls. He orders wells dug at intervals along the southern perimeter. 30 feet down, sappers break through into a tunnel. The passage is sophisticated, shored with timbers, wide enough for men to work side by side, angling directly toward the fortress's weakest point. Fresh tool marks suggest workers abandoned the site within the last 2 hours. The Ottomans have learned that night mining operations are being detected. What they cannot understand is how. Human sentries hear nothing, patrols find no evidence, yet somehow the Hungarians know precisely where digging occurs. Ottoman commanders begin rotating their tunneling operations, working different sections each night, hoping to find a blind spot in the defenders' awareness. They find none. Between July 8th and July 14th, the dogs detect 11 separate mining attempts. Each discovery forces the Ottomans to abandon weeks of careful excavation. Each abandoned tunnel represents hundreds of man-hours wasted, but more significantly, it represents psychological pressure building in the Ottoman ranks. The Janissaries, soldiers who fear nothing in open combat, begin whispering that Belgrade is protected by jinn, spirits who see through earth and stone. This superstition spreads. Ottoman mining crews start refusing night assignments. July 14, 1456, the midnight watch Istvan Kovacs tends to a mastiff named Willem, Lightning, on the northern rampart when the dog does something unprecedented. Willem has been his companion for 4 years, trained from a pup, reliable as sunrise. But tonight, Lightning abandons his post. The massive dog moves along the wall with his nose against the stone, moving methodically, searching. Istvan follows, concerned his animal has gone mad. Other handlers report similar behavior. 10 dogs have begun this strange patrol, seemingly independent of human command. They converge at a specific point on the eastern wall. All 10 animals paw at the same section of stonework. They whine. They dig at the mortar with their claws. The handlers attempt to pull them away, but the mastiffs refuse to move. Hunyadi orders the stones removed. Behind the wall they find a partially excavated chamber. Inside, 40 Ottoman sappers, suffocated. The men attempted to dig upward into the fortress, but their tunnel collapsed, trapping them. They died perhaps 6 hours earlier, their bodies still warm. The dogs detected corpses through 15 feet of stone and earth. This incident is recorded by multiple sources, including the diary of a German mercenary named Wilhelm of Bavaria serving in the garrison. He writes, "The hounds smell death itself. God has given them sight beyond mortal ken. We are protected by beasts who serve the Almighty's purpose." July 19, 1456, the night of many tunnels, the Ottomans change tactics. If the defenders can detect individual mining operations, perhaps they can be overwhelmed by simultaneous attacks. Intelligence suggests this strategy was proposed by Mehmed's chief engineer, a Greek named Alexandros, who previously served the Byzantines before Constantinople's fall. At 11:00 p.m., Ottoman miners begin work at 17 different locations around Belgrade's perimeter. The operation represents the largest coordinated sapping attempt in medieval military history. If successful, entire sections of wall will collapse simultaneously, creating multiple breach points impossible to defend. Within 12 minutes, every war dog in the fortress alerts. The cacophony is described by witnesses as otherworldly. 53 mastiffs, all sensing multiple intrusions simultaneously, create a sound that echoes across the Danube. Ottoman forces hear it in their camps. The noise is interpreted as diabolical, proof that dark forces protect Belgrade. Hungarian defenders race to verify each alert. They discover 16 of the 17 tunnel locations. The sappers working these sites flee, abandoning tools and supplies. One tunnel remains undetected until morning. The 17th team digs until dawn, believing they've found the blind spot. They place their gunpowder charges. They prepare their fuses. At 6:47 a.m. July 20th, just as the fuses are lit, a mastiff named Vihar Storm leads his handler directly to the location. The handler, Janos Toth, sees the smoke of burning fuse cord emerging from the ground. He has perhaps 90 seconds before detonation. Janos doesn't run. He pours water down the hole, flooding the chamber. The fuses extinguish. Minutes later, sappers pull the Ottoman miners from their tunnel. 3 have drowned. The survivors speak of a devil beast whose eyes glowed in the darkness, whose growl shook the earth. Vihar receives the extra meat ration that night. Janos kisses the mastiff's massive head and weeps. The siege begins to turn. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button. What we're discovering here isn't just about military history. It's about the bond between human and animal pushed to supernatural extremes. Share this with someone who loves dark mysteries. Let's discover what happens next in these final days of the siege, when the dogs of Belgrade became legend. July 21st, 1456, 11:43 p.m. The moment that will define the siege occurs with fanfare but with silence. 23 mastiffs stationed along the western quadrant simultaneously cease their patrols. They sit. They turn their heads in unison toward the same section of the river wall. Their handlers report identical behavior. The dogs are not alarmed but focused with absolute intensity. They stare at the stone as if seeing through it. Captain Andras Horvath commands this section. He's a veteran of 11 sieges, a man who trusts empirical evidence over superstition. But he cannot ignore 23 animals exhibiting identical behavior. He orders exploratory digging. 3 feet behind the wall, they break into a cavity. The tunnel is magnificent in its ambition. 12 feet high, 8 feet wide, supported by oak beams that must have been milled specifically for this project. The passage extends over 200 feet, angling beneath the Danube itself before rising toward the fortress foundation. The engineering sophistication surpasses anything previously discovered, but that is not what stops Andras cold. The tunnel is packed with gunpowder, barrels upon barrels stacked to the ceiling, extending as far as torchlight reaches. Military engineers later calculate approximately 4 tons of black powder, enough explosive force to collapse an entire section of Belgrade's western wall and kill hundreds of defenders. The fuses have not been lit. The Ottoman sappers are not present. The chamber sits ready, waiting for a signal that never came. Why? The answer emerges from interrogation of captured Ottoman soldiers over the following days. The sappers abandoned the tunnel 8 hours earlier after hearing what they describe as the breathing of a demon in the darkness. Multiple witnesses report the same phenomenon, a rhythmic sound like an enormous beast inhaling and exhaling that seemed to fill the tunnel despite no visible source. A Hungarian mining expert named Balint examines the tunnel acoustics. He discovers that ground vibrations from the fortress above, channeled through the specific geometry of the passage, create a resonance effect. The sound the Ottoman miners heard was the collective breathing of the war dogs patrolling above them, amplified and distorted by the tunnel's structure into something that seemed impossibly large. The Ottomans fled from the acoustic shadow of 50 dogs breathing in unison. But there is more. Examination of the tunnel floor reveals track marks, paw prints in the soft earth. They are enormous, far larger than any dog should produce. The prints measure 9 inches across. A war mastiff, even the largest, typically leaves prints of 6 inches. Balint cannot explain the discrepancy. Neither can the handlers. The prints are documented, measured, recorded by multiple witnesses. They exist in the siege records, preserved in Hungarian military archives to this day. The official explanation, the soft earth and the weight of the animals, distorted the impressions. The unofficial whispers, something larger than dogs patrolled Belgrade's walls, something the mastiffs recognized as ally, something that left tracks in places the dogs could not physically reach. On July 22nd, at 4:17 a.m., a final discovery occurs. A handler named Laszlo discovers his mastiff, Solium Falcon, standing at the edge of the western rampart, staring down at the abandoned Ottoman tunnel entrance. The dog's posture is neither aggressive nor alert. He simply watches. Laszlo approaches. He looks down. In the pre-dawn gloom, he sees a massive shape moving through the tunnel entrance, far too large to be human, moving with an animal's gait. The shape pauses at the tunnel mouth. For a moment, Laszlo swears it looks up at him, then it vanishes into the Ottoman lines. Laszlo reports this to his confessor but not to his commanders. He's afraid they will think him mad. The priest records the confession in the garrison's religious logs. The entry reads, Laszlo of Pest witnessed a guardian spirit in the form of a great hound, larger than any mortal beast, which ensured the tunnel's discovery. He believes God sent protectors beyond mortal ken. I do not doubt him. The siege breaks that day. The Ottoman assault fails. Mehmed himself is wounded by an arrow. Within a week, the Sultan orders retreat, his first major defeat. The dogs of Belgrade have saved Christianity. The immediate aftermath brings unexpected challenges. When Pope Calixtus III learns of Belgrade's salvation, he orders the Angelus bell rung at noon throughout Christendom to commemorate the victory. This tradition continues today, though most people have forgotten its origin. The dogs are not mentioned in the papal bull. This erasure is deliberate. Church authorities grow uncomfortable with accounts emphasizing animal agency in the city's defense. The narrative shift begins within months. The victory is attributed to John of Capistrano's prayers, John Hunyadi's tactical genius and divine intervention. The mastiffs become footnotes, then curiosities, then gradually disappear from official histories. But the handlers remember, and they begin documenting what the official records will not. Between August and October 1456, several handlers compile a collective account titled The Dog Chronicles of Belgrade in Magyar. The manuscript survives in the Hungarian National Archive. It contains testimony from 41 handlers, descriptions of 97 specific incidents during the siege, and troubling details about the animal's behavior after the Ottoman retreat. The dogs change. Istvan Kovacs reports that Willem becomes unresponsive to commands. The mastiff stands for hours staring toward the south, toward the route the Ottoman army took in retreat. When Istvan attempts to move him, Willem growls. The first time in 4 years the dog has shown aggression toward his handler. The behavior lasts 3 days, then Willem collapses. He dies that night with no apparent cause. 6 other dogs die within a week of the siege ending. Handlers describe identical patterns. The animals become fixated on something invisible. They stop eating. They waste away rapidly. One handler, Ferenc, describes his mastiff Oroslan's final moments. He looked at me with understanding in his eyes. Not the understanding of a beast, but of a man who has seen too much war. He was tired. He wanted to rest. I gave him permission and he died in my arms. The veterinary knowledge of the era cannot explain these deaths. Modern analysis suggests extreme stress and exhaustion, but handlers insist the animal showed no physical injuries or illnesses. They simply stopped. Of the 53 dogs that defended Belgrade, only 29% survive past October. The mortality rate troubles military authorities enough that an inquiry is launched. The investigating officer, Captain Peter Nagy, compiles a report dated November 3, 1456. The report is bizarre. Captain Nagy documents the paw print anomaly from the western tunnel, the impossibly large tracks. He includes sketches. He notes that no large dogs were stationed in that sector, making the print's origin unexplainable. He interviews handlers about their animals' behavior during the siege, recording accounts of the dogs detecting threats at distances that exceed natural canine capabilities by factors of 3 or more. Most disturbingly, he documents 3 separate incidents of dogs alerting to Ottoman positions during daylight hours, when no Ottomans were present. When investigators check these locations hours later, they discover evidence of recent occupation, abandoned tools, fresh fire pits, food scraps. The Ottomans were there but left before the alerts should have been physically possible to detect. Captain Nagy's conclusion: the mastiffs of Belgrade demonstrated abilities beyond natural law, whether through divine intervention or through some aspect of canine sense not yet understood by natural philosophy. These animals perceive threats that human observation could not detect. It is the opinion of this investigator that their service constituted a miracle. The report is filed and promptly buried in military archives. It contradicts the official narrative being constructed. By 1457, the story has been rewritten. Histories credit human courage and divine favor. The dogs are mentioned only in passing, usually with dismissive language about soldiers' superstitions. The handlers are never interviewed for official chronicles. But something else happens that year. something that suggests authorities recognize what the handlers know. King Ladislaus V of Hungary issues a royal decree in March 1457, establishing the Order of the Hound, an elite military unit composed of handlers and their war dogs. The decree specifies that mastiff bloodlines from the Belgrade defenders must be preserved through controlled breeding. Handlers are granted noble status, unprecedented for commoners. Their families receive lands and incomes. This is not merely reward for service. This is an attempt to weaponize whatever happened at Belgrade. The order operates for 33 years. Records document their deployment in 12 major battles and sieges across Hungary's frontiers. Success rates are anomalous. Fortifications defended by order units never fall to surprise attacks. Mining operations are detected with perfect accuracy. Night raids consistently fail. Then, in 1490, the order is quietly disbanded. The official explanation: budgetary constraints. The unofficial explanation emerges from letters between King Matthias Corvinus and his advisors discovered in the 1870s. The handlers were becoming a problem. They spoke too freely about what their dogs sensed. They claimed the animals detected presences during battles, spirits or forces that fought alongside Christian forces against the Ottomans. This mysticism troubled church authorities. More troubling, the dogs were becoming unstable. Second and third generation descendants of the Belgrade defenders exhibited erratic behavior. Some refused to work. Others became uncontrollably aggressive. Several handlers reported their animals saw things that were not there and would attack empty air. The breeding program was failing. The bloodlines were degrading. Whatever made the Belgrade dogs extraordinary could not be reliably reproduced. By 1500, the war mastiff program is abandoned entirely. Hungary shifts to conventional military doctrines. The dogs and their handlers fade into history, but the handlers' descendants remember. They preserve the stories, and in small villages throughout Hungary, even today, families keep fragments of the dog chronicles, handwritten accounts passed down through generations, describing what their ancestors witnessed during those 21 days in July 1456. These accounts speak of dogs who saw through stone and earth, dogs who heard breathing in tunnels 200 feet away, dogs who detected death itself, dogs who served not just human masters but something greater. And they speak of the giant tracks, the impossible paw prints found in places no mortal dog could reach. The Siege of Belgrade dogs represents a turning point in military history that historians rarely acknowledge. Before 1456, animal warfare meant horses for cavalry, elephants for shock troops, or dogs as attack animals. Belgrade demonstrated something different: animals as intelligence assets, as early warning systems, as force multipliers through sensory capabilities humans lack. This concept terrified military establishments precisely because it couldn't be controlled or replicated. You can train soldiers, you can manufacture weapons, but you cannot reliably produce the bond that existed between the Belgrade handlers and their mastiffs, a connection so profound that men could read a dog's body language like text, interpreting warnings that saved thousands of lives. The Ottoman Empire studies the defeat extensively. Records from the Topkapi Palace archives uncovered by historians in the 1960s reveal that Mehmed II commissioned a thorough analysis of the Belgrade siege. The resulting report, written by his chief military advisor Zaganos Pasha, devotes 11 pages to the matter of the Christian hounds. Zaganos recommends that the Ottoman Empire develop its own war dog program. He proposes breeding Turkish Kangals for tunnel detection. The program is attempted for 3 years before being abandoned as ineffective. The Ottoman dogs, while fierce and loyal, never demonstrate the seemingly supernatural awareness of the Belgrade mastiffs. Why? Zaganos proposes a theory that modern animal behaviorists find fascinating. The Belgrade dogs succeeded because of genuine partnership, not dominance. The handlers lived with their animals, ate with them, slept beside them. The relationship was reciprocal. Ottoman military culture emphasized dominance and control, approaches that Zaganos concluded were unsuitable for developing the animal intelligence required for such service. This failure influences Ottoman siege tactics for the next century. Rather than rely on stealth mining operations, they shift toward overwhelming artillery bombardment. This technological evolution arguably accelerates the development of modern siege warfare. But the implications extend beyond military history. The Belgrade siege becomes a touchstone for debates about animal cognition that continue today. How did the dogs detect threats at impossible distances? Modern theories propose ultrasonic hearing, seismic sensitivity through their paws, or olfactory capabilities far exceeding current scientific understanding. But these explanations struggle with specific documented incidents. Like the simultaneous alerts from dogs stationed in different locations, sometimes separated by hundreds of feet, responding to the same threat at the exact same moment. Some researchers propose a form of collective behavior, similar to how flocks of birds move in synchronization. The Belgrade mastiffs, through constant proximity and shared training, may have developed a kind of pack intelligence that allowed them to share sensory information beyond individual capability. This theory gains support from studies of modern military working dogs. Animals that train together develop coordinated response patterns that exceed the sum of individual abilities. But nothing documented in modern programs approaches the scale of what happened at Belgrade. The giant paw prints remain unexplained. Conventional historians dismiss them as measurement errors or exaggerated folklore, but the documentation is extensive. Multiple witnesses, precise measurements, sketches from different sources that show remarkable consistency. The prints exist in the historical record, troubling and inexplicable. Some researchers propose a psychological explanation. The stress of siege warfare created shared hallucinations. Handlers, desperately seeking reassurance, collectively imagined a guardian presence. This theory has merit. Combat stress can produce powerful delusions, but it doesn't explain the tactical successes. The dogs detected real threats with real accuracy. The tunnels they found were not imaginary. The Ottoman sappers they exposed were not hallucinations. Something happened at Belgrade that saved the city. The cultural impact persists in unexpected ways. Throughout Central Europe, especially in Hungary and Serbia, folk traditions preserve stories of the saints' hounds, ghost dogs that patrol battlefields and protect the faithful. These legends almost certainly originate with the Belgrade siege. Parents tell children about guardian mastiffs who can see dangers before they arrive, and in military training programs worldwide, a small subset of instructors still reference the Belgrade Standard, the theoretical maximum performance achievable by working dogs. It's considered an unreachable ideal, a benchmark that exists more as inspiration than practical goal. Because no Melita, Rye working dog program since 1456 has ever achieved what those 53 mastiffs accomplished during 21 days in July. The question remains, what actually happened at Belgrade? The skeptical answer, highly trained dogs performed at the upper limit of canine capability, and their success was amplified by folklore and the need for morale-boosting propaganda. The historical answer, something extraordinary occurred that contemporaries struggled to understand and that we lack sufficient evidence to fully explain. The uncomfortable answer, those handlers witnessed something that doesn't fit our understanding of animal cognition or military history, and rather than acknowledge the mystery, we've spent 5 centuries explaining it away. In 2003, the Hungarian military briefly attempted to recreate the Belgrade dog program. Using modern breeding techniques and contemporary understanding of animal behavior, trainers tried to develop mastiffs with tunnel detection capabilities. The program lasted 18 months before being quietly cancelled. The official reason, budgetary constraints. The unofficial reason, according to a handler who spoke anonymously to a Hungarian newspaper, the dogs were good. They were highly trained, but they weren't different. They didn't have what those dogs had in 1456. We don't know what that was, and we can't create it. Whatever happened at Belgrade died with the original handlers and their mastiffs. We have their testimony. We have the historical records. We have the impossible paw prints preserved in military archives. What we don't have is an explanation that satisfies both historical evidence and rational skepticism. What do you think gave the Belgrade dogs their seemingly supernatural abilities? Was it simply the pinnacle of training and the human-animal bond? Or did something else, something we still don't understand, protect that fortress during those 21 days in July 1456? Leave your theories in the comments. If you believe the handlers witnessed something beyond natural explanation, tell us what you think it was. If you think there's a rational explanation we've overlooked, share your analysis. This story represents one of history's most documented military mysteries, a case where the evidence exists, but the explanation remains elusive centuries later. Subscribe to Fierce Sermon for more lost chapters of history where the line between fact and legend blurs beyond recognition. These are the stories that official histories bury, the accounts that make us question what we think we know about our past. Hit that notification bell, join our community of mystery seekers, because history's darkest corners are full of stories like this. True events that sound impossible, yet happen nonetheless. See you in the next video. Until then, remember, sometimes the guardians watching over us see things we cannot. And sometimes, that's the only thing standing between survival and annihilation.